Now, it's the age-old discussion for South Africans, the missing middle, student loans and NSFAS, not having enough money to support everyone looking to study after school. Despite improvements in recent years, thousands of students are either unable to secure the fees to get into higher education or they are unable to pay the remaining fees to complete their studies. So with so many priced out, what can be done and what ideas do the students have? Let's speak now to UKZN SRC President Siyabonga Mlondo and Asive Dlanjwa, spokesperson for the SA Union of Students. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us this evening. A very pertinent discussion as many matriculants are going to be receiving their results this coming week. Many of them will be wanting to get into a university, but of course not having enough funds for registrations or for fees. Asive, maybe let's start with you. From a national standpoint, how significant is the funding gap issue for students in our country?
Good evening to you and also to your viewers and your listeners and to my fellow guest, the president of UKZN. Look, it is a huge crisis, especially to the extent to which it impacts the missing middle, which we appreciate that are members of the working class or come from a background of the working class. So number one, that's a huge issue. And I think numbers more or less about 18 to 20% of students would fall in that missing middle, number one. Number two is obviously the issue of students that are engaging their postgraduate studies, who, because we appreciate that NSFAS only pays for the first qualification. And as much as people might think doing your postgraduate is just a mere academic exercise, it's not. Many professional qualifications actually require one to have their honors or their masters to be able to be certified in a particular field. So this is why the students would find this backlog. So it's a huge issue, and this is obviously notwithstanding, which I'll probably also expand on the interview, I suppose some of the work that has been done to the extent to which about 90% of households in South Africa actually now qualify to be funded by the state. But in itself, the funding issue is a crisis.
Siyabonga, I mean, how does this funding gap impact not only access to education, but also just the overall student experience at UKZN?
No, thank you. Greetings to you and also greetings to the viewers. What you must understand also is the fact that as of 2018, education has always became commodity in South Africa. But at the same time, you have to then say in 2018, the government block grant has been decreasing till today. And then you have school leavers who, there's a high rate of school leavers who are expected to come to institutions of higher learning. But at the same time, again, you find yourself that the government block grant to fund these students has been decreasing. And also, NSFAS has been played as an institution which must provide funds for these students. But when you come to January and students, their statuses are still on evaluation, and when they come into institutions of higher learning, they still have problems of registration fees. But then the main issue would then subside the fact that the education has always become commodity in South Africa, and then also the government grant has always been decreasing as of 2018 till today. This is a problem which then creates frustrations for students who register during in January for institutions of higher learning.
So, Siyabonga, I mean, like you mentioned, many of these school leavers are going to struggle to raise funds for registration and fees in the next coming weeks. What specific challenges do these students face in securing these funds, and how do these challenges vary from different demographics?
Well, you can attest that there are students which will then afford to pay registration fees for higher education. Then you have students which come from quarter 1 to quarter 3 of high schools, which will then, for sure, you can say that these ones do not afford to pay these registration fees. And then when they come to issues of higher learning, you find them in the gates waiting for them to be registered. And also, institutions of higher learning give them offers to say, come and learn in this higher education sector. And also, but then those who are affording, which are always are the whites and coming from the schools which are much affordable. Those ones afford to then register for higher education. And then those who come from Qatar 1, Qatar 3, those are the fundamental people who we as SRCs find them on the gates waiting for us to help them to assure that they register each and every time when they come. But we have a problem of that. Even today, these students which come from Qatar 1, Qatar 3, you find that NSFAS themselves, their statuses are still on evaluation processes. Others have not submitted proper documents, and others still have every issue. Even others have not even applied for NSFAS, and they expect us as the SRCs to then say we must come forward to then help them to then have access to what the higher education sector. But the main problem is that these students, in day-to-day basis, when they come to universities, they don't afford education and they have problems to say this NSFAS does not cater for all of them whatsoever, because those who then afford education are able to pay, but those who then don't afford to pay, they are looking forward for the SRC to then come to their rescue.
Right. Asive, I mean, you speak of the missing middle. Siyabonga speaks of how NSFAS really doesn't cover for everybody that certainly needs it. What alternative funding models do you think or solutions would your organization have in advocating to help bridge that funding gap? And how can these models be implemented effectively for all students to be able to benefit?
Look, we have proposed a few funding models. The first is our proposals, which have been consistent throughout the years, even towards the MTT report, or which would then become the MTT report, but the MTT process, we had also made submissions. But our submissions are along the lines of, first of all, we have submitted that the grant system must be extended to 600,000. Because we appreciate that up to 600,000, these are all students of the working class. So that was the first proposal that we had put on the table. We're obviously cognizant of fiscal constraints in the country and where the economy finds itself. And then we had a hybrid and an alternate submission to government to say, look, ideally, we would not want any student to be encumbered by loans of any sort and of any form. But we appreciate that the state might not necessarily be able to accede to our proposal now. So what they must then do is that at the very least increase it from 350,000 to about 450,000, and then the remainder of that, and then it'd be a loan system from 450 at least to 600,000. It's not desirable, as I say, it's not ideal, but at least we know that while we do not have funds, students will be able to access institutions of higher learning. And we said that those loans must be backed by government, they must not be from the private sector and from banks, and that they must be zero rated in terms of interest, and that the repayment terms must be favorable. So those at the interim is which we had suggested. The second thing we suggested was a consolidation of all public funding across all public institutions, municipalities, various government departments, to ensure that that funding is channeled towards assisting the students of the poor and the working class. The third thing which we had proposed was a specific education tax on private companies, because one of the greatest beneficiaries of the public education system in South Africa is actually the private sector themselves. And we appreciate education to not be a commodity, but to be a basic need that all South Africans should have. So those are some of the proposals that we had put on the table in terms of trying to broaden funding in the country.
Siyabonga, I mean, as Asive is saying, they've put a number of proposals on the table, but UKZN has its own initiatives with regards to assisting students. In fact, it's the SRC Trust Fund campaign. Just talk to us about that.
No, thank you. As much as we then say, it's true that government might be, we can say maybe there are certain initiatives which are taking place to say to avoid this thing of a gap of students having to be denied registration fees in terms of accessibility to universities. But in the immediate, students, we are, as SRCs, we are faced with students in the immediate effect. So we are saying us, in the immediate, we are having what we call a UKZN SRC trust fund, which we then source funds from private sector and also public sector. But at the same time, again, we have been struggling again to find these donors to say they must then fund this campaign for us to then help these students, because time to time we know that NSFAS is not able to fund every student, but through these SRC trust fund campaigns, we are able to source funds even from the institutions and even from the private sector. We are able to say, fine, let us fund these students and say, fine, these students who do not afford solely them, let's try and then fund them to say we must not then accept any student which is going to be denied accessibility to our institutions through this campaign. But at the same time, we are struggling to then find donors who are going to contribute to these campaigns which we are having. But at the same time, again, we are proponents of free education, but we know that free education is a process which needs to go a process of through legislation, and the parliament must not. But in the immediate, we are offering this SRC trust fund to say, fund this SRC trust fund campaign to them to ensure this. There are some students which need these funds, and then we say, we are funding these students. And we've been doing this for closely about 3 years now. We have been consistent to funding these students, but at the same time, we can't afford to fund all of them at the same time.
Right.
There are too many students which are left behind. So we need donors who are going to make sure that they fund this program
and they can assist with the program, right? Unfortunately, we have run out of time. It would have been very interesting to know just how far you've gone in terms of how many students you've been able to provide this assistance to. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. That was Siyabonga Mlondo, the UKZN SRC president, as well as Asive Dlanjwa, the spokesperson for the SA Union of Students.